Welcome to the Sales Leader of Influence show. For sales leaders who lead with soul, spirit, and spine. In a world obsessed with tactics, this is the show for those who know leadership is personal. And here's your host, Bernadette McClelland.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Sales Leader of Influence show. And today, it's all around the decision crisis, or should I say, indecision. So we are at a point in time here where we're living in decision crisis. And what I mean by that is we in the sales world know that our buyers out there are going through so much hesitation. And I want to address that today. And I also want to address the fact that leaders and salespeople are also going through a ton of indecision as well. So let me just touch on the last 2 points first, being the leaders and the salespeople. So I've just read, HubSpot have got their inbound conference happening today, and I've just read one of my colleagues has written a post, and it's basically around sales leaders still not holding or not being able to hold salespeople accountable, and it's also sharing data on the fact that salespeople have hit this real level of mediocrity. And when we look at those two pieces of data, we've got to ask ourselves, for what reason is this happening? And I put it down to choice. I put it down to the fact that we have every opportunity to make choices that will either move us forward or hold us back. And so if you're a sales leader listening to this, you will be in one of two camps. You're either holding your team accountable, which is kudos to you, or you're struggling. And so this comes down to decision as well. And today, even though I want to open it up to talking about our buyers' lack of decisiveness, I want to bring you into the mix as well, and also your salespeople, because we know that salespeople, they have responsibilities like we all do, but they can choose where to spend their time most effectively. So what I want to do today is I want to drill down a little bit into 3 principles around this decision crisis and this lack of decisiveness. Because we know, and deep down inside we know, that it is not about more information. It is not about more data. Our buyers aren't, they're not making decisions because we're not giving them bonuses or discounts or new terms or anything like that. It's got nothing to do with any of that. And this is a really important conversation that sales leaders must have with their teams, because the reasons that our buyers aren't making decisions, just like probably the reasons leaders and salespeople aren't making decisions to make their world better, has everything to do with what is happening in the shadows, what is happening in the whispers, what is happening in the stories that our buyers are telling themselves. And so I want to share a couple of stories with you. When we're talking about decisions, if I had $1 for every time someone asked me, it's like, how did you make the decision to come to America in your 60s, sell everything, and come over with 6 suitcases, 2 wheel-ons, and 2 backpacks? Like, how did you make that decision? And so I'm going to share within the principles how we did that. And I have just had a conversation with one of my mentors from a couple of years ago. And he's Australian, and he came over to America from Australia, I don't know, a couple of years before we did, probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. couple of kids in tow, and his wife. And they made a decision earlier this year to move back to Australia. And within the first 4 months, my colleague knew in his gut that he wasn't happy back in Australia. Nothing to do with Australia, nothing to do with America, just he wasn't happy. Bought the lovely house on the canal, bought the cars, did all of that, and realized he wasn't happy. So here's where this links in with our buyers and their lack of decisiveness. So what he did is, in conjunction with his wife, they have moved back to America, like 7-8 months after moving to Australia. Now, a lot of people say, oh my God, that's crazy, and at what expense? But here is the alignment with our buyers, because yes, it's cost him removalists. He's bought a house. He's taken his car back to the dealership, and the guy said, you've waited longer for the car than what you've had the car for. So all these costs to come back to the same neighborhood he was in and have to go through all that rigmarole. And it's like, why would you do that? And the connection here with our buyers is that we can lay on the table for them in a negotiation or in a proposal or in a conversation all the logical reasons why they should buy our product or service or idea. And even though they can see the logic, like it's logical, it makes sense that I go with you, however, I'm not going to make a decision. And that little indecisiveness, that word maybe, is actually our biggest competition. So what's the link with my colleague? The link is we can talk about the cost of inaction. And he could have stayed over there in Australia and not taken action to come back. But the cost of not coming back would have been greater than the financial cost of him moving back to America, because there potentially could have been health impacts, family, you don't know. And so in his mind, in weighing it up, the cost of staying in Australia was far greater than moving over back to America. So when we are with our buyers and our prospects and our clients, and we are doing the maths, and we are saying, hey, the cost of inaction, the total cost of ownership, the return on investment, doing the maths makes logical sense for you to move forward. And in their mind, they are still saying no. And that's because we're going in with the maths and not being able to move from the economics to the emotional. Because today, the biggest reason why people are not making decisions are because they do not feel safe. And so within the sales leader of influence model, we actually dive deep into this, because when you're in a sales conversation, you as leaders need to be able to walk your team or your people through the economic reasons and the cost of inaction and all the rest of it. But you also need to be able to teach your salespeople now how to move through the emotional component of the sales conversation to make the buyer feel safe. So I want to share with you today 3 principles that I want you to leave today and start to think a little bit differently. How can I, as the leader, help my sales team go out there and start to have different conversations so that we can elevate the conversation away from the typical What's your budget? Who's in the authority? What's the time frame? All that bant and medic and all the rest of it. I'm not saying anything's wrong with that, but we need to elevate our conversations a lot more and bring in that whole emotional factor. So the first one that I want to share with you is the fact that, yes, decisions are emotional, absolutely emotional before they're logical. And now we have heard that mantra for years, till the cows come home. And so what we need to realize is that at a neuroscience perspective, we do actually, our brain does flip to the emotional and then to the logical. And so we need to be able to recognize certain things. I actually think that we go logical first, then emotional, then back to logical, to be quite honest. And so when you think about buyers and they're ghosting you maybe, or they're absolutely not doing anything, maybe is the big word, or they're just not making any decision at all. What you've got to realize is it's because at that point in time, or leading up to that point in time, they do not feel safe. It's got nothing to do with your business case. It's got nothing to do with you personally. It's got nothing to do with your product. They are not feeling safe. And so within the Sales Leader of Influence program, how I've split it out is economical and emotional. And I just kind of want to take you through the acronym and the model very, very quickly. It's risks. And so RISKS. So you've got to realize that your clients or your prospects, there may be regret there. They may have made a decision last year that went haywire. So there's regret there. There's their internalization of things. It's like, what if I make the wrong decision? How am I going to look within the business? There's that whole safety and security factor and stress. It's like, is it worth my time to do this? And what's my level of security or safety going to be? Will I lose my job? And then knowledge is the K, and that's maybe they don't want to let you know they don't know what you're talking about, or there's a lack of knowledge about something. And ultimately the bottom one is stories that they've told themselves and scars. We all have scars. And so we don't know what's going on in their mind. Now, if you as a salesperson start to say, I can give you a discount, or give you a bonus, or let's redo the contract terms, none of that is going to make a difference. So I really want you to realize the power behind that cliche that we just kind of let kind of go up, whatever the saying is, water off the duck's back or whatever it is. It's like, yes, it is emotional. And so when you recognize that may help you start to have different conversations and ask different questions. Now, leading from that, the second principle is that every decision has two forces. Now, I'm saying here economical and emotional, but I want to take that kind of a step further again and go that you are either, if you can picture a bell curve, on one end you've got the laggards, on the other end you've got the early adopters. Well, another way of saying that is that there are some people who are absolutely motivated by moving away from things, away from problems, away from newness, away from novelty, away from things. And then there are other people who are motivated by moving toward things. And so you, as the leader, must recognize, to start with, how you are motivated, what motivates you, what motivates your team. There's no right or wrong. Like, now we come back to, why did we come across to America? Well, we are moving toward possibility people. We're not worried about not leaving Australia. And so we are moving toward people. Well, my husband may not be, but living with me, he's got no choice. But was his idea to come, by the way, too. And so you need to recognize, what are your prospects? Because once again, most salespeople are moving toward possibility people. Let's go out and get the deal. Let's get some more money. They're moving toward possibility. Now, here's the thing. Most of the population aren't. So if your salespeople are going in and they're just talking about the deal and how great this is going to be, and it's not going to land either. And so we need to recognize, once again, there's no right or wrong, but buyers aren't linear. And so some of your buyers are going to be moving toward possibility people, and others are going to be those who are wanting to avoid some kind of loss. And so when we start to think about why people decide no, most of the buyers are more than likely thinking, I want to avoid loss. I want to avoid risk. I want to avoid regret. I want to avoid all of those things within the risks model. So the most successful or influential salespeople and leaders recognize that, and they are able to listen, see, watch for, notice, and really feel what's happening in a conversation. So that is something that when we're looking at how do we help our buyers make decisions, we really need to tap into the psychology behind it all. And thirdly is, if you have been listening to any of the other episodes, you'll know that I talk about the gift of the gap. So there is a gap between everything. And once again, are you moving that way or are you moving that way? No right or wrong, but there is a gap between each because we're in a world of polarities. Hot, cold, up, down, black, white. And so there was always this gap. And when we're talking about decision making and we're talking about our buyers and this whole indecisiveness, decidophobia, yes, it's a real thing. Some people really do have a fear of making decisions. Most buyers already know what they should do. Okay? They know what they should do. Just like you as a sales leader and your salespeople, you know what you should do as well. And so there's this gap. And in the gap is the knowing, the gap between the knowing and the doing. And so knowing something does not equal doing. You know, it's the old adage, you can't learn to swim by reading a book. And so this gap, inside this gap, is where decisions are made or decisions go to die. And influence does not come from us telling people what to do. And so if your salespeople are out there having conversations and they're continually moving toward possibility and telling the buyer what's really great about this, that is not going to move the needle. Okay, so what's going to move the needle is your salespeople and yourself helping the buyer and you, your team, to actually cross the gap, to actually cross the chasm, to actually navigate and calibrate yourselves and therefore your conversations without any confusion and being really clear and without any fear. And that's the other thing as well. And so when I work with leaders, sales leaders, and always have done, then this is why I have built these frameworks to actually decode the exact moment in that gap and around it. Because this is where some of the biggest revenue shifts happen. And so they're my 3 principles that I wanted to share with you, and that is that decisions are emotional and that every decision has 2 forces, and that ultimately there is the gift of the gap between the knowing and the doing, and that's kind of where the magic happens. So to wrap this up, this whole decision crisis that we are finding ourselves in it's not going to go away. If anything, I think more and more people are going to fall into this whole lack of clarity, which is why revenue and role clarity is another component of the sales leader of influence model, because of this very reason, because it's so important. And so once you realize that all of us have the ability to choose. Now, our buyers do, your sales teams do, you do, I do, my colleague, my mentor does, my husband does. And once you realize the power that you have when you do choose and it is aligned to the leader that you want to be seen as and that you want to become, everything changes. Absolutely everything changes. So if today's episode resonated with you, then I would love to invite you to go a little bit deeper with me into the Sales Leader of Influence Accelerator. And so this is where we decode all the decision making, the psychological safety, the coaching, the human in the deal, revenue and role clarity, and bringing you out as a thought leader. So I'm gonna the URL is salesleaderofinfluence.com. And I'm just going to put it out there that this is not for everybody, okay? There's a certain energy that I love to work with. It's got to be growth focused. And when you think about a group of people in a room together, that energy has got to lift, we've got to lift each other up. This is not about somebody coming to the table in a unresourceful, I'm stuck, there's nothing wrong with being stuck, but I'm in victim mode. We don't have time for that. We want to get to market real quick. And the way we get to market real quick is we diminish the gap. And so by diminishing the gap, we actually go vertical and not horizontal. So I want to help you do that. So if you go to salesleaderofinfluence.com, there is an application form there. And that is why I've got the application form, because I only want a small group of leaders and I want the right leaders. So on that note, I'd love to know what you've taken away from today. And more importantly, I'd love to know what shifts and changes as a leader you've made with your team. And I look forward to seeing you this time next week on the Sales Leader of Influence show. Have an amazing week, and bye for now.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching the Sales Leader of Influence show with your host, Bernadette McClelland. See you next Wednesday live at 5 o'clock Eastern.